Democracy That Delivers is brought to you by the Center for International Private Enterprise. Now, to your host.
Hello, everyone. It's really an honor to be here today. My name's Lars Benson, and I'm the Regional Director for CYPE Africa. And I'm joined by two fabulous co-hosts, Zoe and Autumn.
Hi there, Lars. Thank you for coming with us on the podcast today.
Fantastic. And today it's really a pleasure and an honor to feature and to invite to our podcast two emerging leaders at CYPE. One of them is Imabong Akpan-Ita. Imabong, hi.
Hi, Lars. Hi, Zoe, Autumn. Really excited to be here today.
And then the second is our program coordinator, Adia Armstrong. Adia.
Thanks, Lars. And thanks, Zoe and Autumn, for having me.
Fantastic. So let's start off, since we have, it seems like an international crowd here today. Imabong. That's an interesting name. Imabong, can you tell us a little bit about where you're from?
Sure. Just since you mentioned that it's an interesting name, I'll share the meaning. It means the love of God. I'm from Nigeria originally. I was born and raised here in Lagos, Nigeria. Lagos has been many times compared to New York City. So just to give those of you who have never been an idea of, where it is that I grew up.
Thank you.
I love a good name with meaning. Mine, by the way, means full of life. So love of God isn't too far there.
Mm-hmm.
And Adia, now I guess you're going to have to tell us about your name. So,
yeah, of course. So actually, similar theme. Adia means gift from God. I guess everyone has some really cool name backgrounds here. And then for me, I'm from the outskirts of Toronto, Canada. So I spent the beginning part of my life in the outskirts of Montreal, and then kind of that second half in the outskirts of Toronto, Canada.
Wow. So we have quite an international crowd. And so tell me, what brought both of you to CYPE? Adia, why don't you start?
Yeah. So for me, CYPE was kind of I figured now looking back, kind of like a natural progression for me. When I was in school, I worked a lot with different minority groups on campus. My internships were revolving around immigrant populations, and so my research was related to refugee populations. And I realized that the kind of common thread throughout all of those experiences was working with these different groups to kind of empower their own communities and to kind of progress in whatever, context that I was working in. So I had the opportunity one of the summers that I was interning in DC to actually speak with someone who was working at CYPE, and they're still here. And I kind of got an, insider scoop to the work that CYPE does and kind of the impact that CYPE has. And that kind of stuck with me as I was kind of figuring out what I wanted to do. And I wasn't even really familiar with international development or what that really meant or entailed. So kind of having my own experiences, backgrounds of working with, these various groups, and then also kind of getting that insider perspective from the person who worked at CYPE, I was like, oh, okay, this seems like, an interesting realm to kind of venture into. And so when I saw, the opening of the Africa team, I had to jump at the opportunity. So, and, since then, it's just been a great kind of like learning opportunity to not only contribute to the work that CYPE does, but also grow as an international development professional myself.
Great. And Imabong, what brought you and how did you come to CYPE?
For me, it could not be farther from a natural flow. I was coming from a non-profit background, but non-profit on a very different way, in that I was coming from a human rights protection and promotion background, having worked with a couple of non-profits and having been in the volunteer system for most of my life. I think I started volunteering when I was 11. That happened for me because my mom owns an NGO and it's very prominent in the women's rights protection space in Africa. So I naturally was pushed into that way. But for me, I stumbled across CYPE actually when I saw the job opening. I had just transitioned out of the work I was doing at that time. And I was actually confused when I read the CYPE website about what exactly was CYPE did. I could not put two and two together just based off reading it. And so when I had the first discussion with my now manager, it was like mind-blowing. It was, there is actually an organization that does this. There are people who are able to think of these amazing initiatives to address such a prominent issue in Africa, especially having lived and grown here for most of my life. So it was just something I definitely wanted to be a part of or get a feel of hands-on.
I love that both of you mentioned having role models through the steps that took you to SIPE. You know, whether it's Adia's role model within SIPE or Imabong's own mother, right, in the nonprofit sector. Imabong and Adia, did you have other role models that you think contributed to where you are now and where you're going?
Other role models in my family, yes. Unlike a lot of African families that I know, I'm from a family that has very strong independent, women who a lot of the times have kind of, led or headed the family. A lot of the women in my family definitely stood as inspirations. But outside of that, I think I had a mentor who, when I was in high school, took a sociology elective class that I had, and she did all this amazing work in Morocco. Then I went to high school in New York City. So she would come back and tell us about these adventures that she had. She worked a lot with children and marginalized groups, but mostly a lot of work with children who were not so privileged. And I just felt like she was superhuman. One, because a lot of the times when I had personal struggles in my academics, she was somebody who I could go to. But two, because this was somebody who I related to, an African-American woman who was doing everything that I thought I would never be able to do at that point in time. So she was extremely inspirational for me. I eventually saw that she went on Survivor or one of those shows, and I'm just like, look at you being amazing again. So, yeah.
That's always impressive to me when you see women who do have it all, are succeeding in their work lives, but also doing crazy things on the side, like going on Survivor. That's so cool.
Right.
I think for me, I don't know if I have that kind of great of a kind of elaborate background story, but I think for me, in a really simple way, I would say probably my dad. He really embodies kind of what it means to be selfless and also mindful of others. And I think thinking of the world and your contributions to it greater than yourself. So I think I kind of try to emulate that in my personal life. And I think that's what I'm also trying to do in my professional life as well. And I think, international development is a really great way to do that. And kind of similar to Imabong's point, I think the realm of international development in this kind of sector needs more women leaders and also women of color and Black women. And I think, as time goes on, I think it's, getting better, but I think that's definitely an area of improvement. And I hope to kind of contribute to that. And again, with colleagues like Imabong, to be able to show that diversity does exist in the sector and what that can look like and how women and women of color can contribute to the progress made here as well. So
it's important to draw attention to the women that are leading the path for the rest of us who are coming up behind them. But also, like you said, the men, your dad, who is contributing to this effort and helping women rise up and setting good examples. So that's really a beautiful sentiment.
I have a question for both of you. You're recognized as being an emerging leader at SIPE for really the work that you have achieved, for your ability to work with other colleagues, for being strong, independent women. But it doesn't matter whether you're a man or woman that really is able to demonstrate leadership. So if you were going to mentor or counsel somebody who is just joining SIPE or really a woman who was coming into international development, what would be your piece of advice in terms of what makes for a strong woman leader?
I think I would tell her to stop. And I say stop because I can almost be sure that she's already doing this. Stop selling yourself short. Stop thinking you can't do it. I have been privileged to work with women groups as a mentor and as a participant. And one research that I was part of during my time in university was reviewing the performance of women and men in interviews. And when I say interviews, this could be for jobs, for scholarships, whatever it was. And one of the amazing things that we found was women who were overqualified were selling themselves short. And men who were extremely underqualified were talking about bringing the sun and the moon together in an afternoon. So women, whether because of history or because of our upbringing, sometimes because of the societies in which we grow, have over time been conditioned to think that they're unable to do certain things. And that's one reason I am personally grateful for my manager, Lola Adekonye, who from my first day at SIPE basically told me, look, you're a star and you're going to be a star while you're here. So That
Oh
would be
my
piece of
goodness.
advice.
For our listeners who can't see us right now, all of us are nodding emphatically along because I think that is so relatable. And honestly, I needed to hear that. Thank you, Emma Bong.
Super.
Yeah, similarly, again, I think both Ima Bong and I have great managers coming into the role. Mine is Hannah Wetters, and I think from day one, she was extremely inclusive of me. And so on a similar tone to Ima Bong's advice, I would say, my advice to them would be to speak up. I think there is somewhat that potential need to, want to observe at first and maybe fade into the background, thinking that maybe you don't know as much as the people in the room, or maybe your ideas are not up to the standard that you think they should be. But I think in terms of advice for anyone joining SIPE tomorrow, for example, I would just say, feel free to speak up. I think especially at SIPE, but on the Africa team, it's a pretty open and inclusive team that they value input no matter what your position or your background. And we want that diversity of opinion. So having people feel comfortable voicing that from day one is something that I was encouraged to do. And I think that's something that I would pass on as well, is just be confident. You were chosen for a reason to join the team, and they want to hear what you have to say. So be confident in that.
So should we practice what we preach a little bit and get into what it is that makes the two of you stars here at SIPE? I know that's an uncomfortable question to talk about your own successes, but this is what Women's History Month is about, right? So should we dig into what it is you two are doing on a day-to-day basis on the Africa team with Lars?
Sure, I can go ahead and go first. So I'm an associate program officer on the Africa team, and more specifically, I work on our collective action initiatives that's really focused on cross-sector collaboration. And I lead the DC side of the Ethiopia Field Office Operations and Management in collaboration with the field team. And also I support a civic engagement hub project in Ethiopia. But my two main projects, one of them is a regional digital economy project in Ethiopia and Kenya. And that one's focused on the inclusion of small and medium-sized businesses in being able to participate, on a national or local level in policy reforms around the digital economy. And really the goal there is to raise awareness and build relationships between medium and small-sized businesses and government to kind of develop policies and practices that are inclusive of these medium, small-sized businesses in the digital economy and the reforms that both Kenya and Ethiopia are undergoing, just because they have so much of potential. And this is an emerging space. So making sure that's inclusive. And then the second project that I work on is another regional project based in the G5 Sahel focused on business for peace. So for that project, we work with various private sector actors in the G5 Sahel to kind of pair inclusive economic policy with security policy in order to counter violent extremism. And this project is really mindful of including youth and women, so traditionally excluded minority groups in that space. And we've been able to work with regional governing bodies like the G5 Sahel Executive Secretariat, the Women's Platform branch of that regional body, and also develop the Sahel Business Initiative out of that, all with the goal of kind of creating economic and security policies in the Sahel that are inclusive of minorities and inclusive of the business community and their needs and how they're affected by insecurity and violent extremism. So I feel very lucky to work with the team that I do and the field staff that we have on these two projects specifically.
I work as a program associate for the Africa team. I work on the anti-corruption programs that we have, and under our anti-corruption program, we have three major flagship projects that I work on. One is an annual ethical compliance project, which kicked off, I believe, in 2019, where we basically bring different stakeholders from across Africa to discuss the similarities or differences in the issues of corruption and non-ethical compliance faced in different countries, and basically galvanize useful and constructive discussion around them to begin to think of solutions and ways forward for the African business community as a whole. The other one is a network of compliance experts called the Africa Business Integrity Network. This is one where I play a major role. I manage the network of anti-corruption and compliance experts who deliver services through training, capacity building, and consulting for businesses in the African business community. And the third one is Ethics First, which I'll go into a bit later. But just to speak a bit more to the network and why I enjoy it, The network brings together people from different walks of life across Africa. Right now, we have about 12 countries from across sub-Saharan Africa who are part of this network. And between 2020, when I joined SIPE, and now, I've gotten to engage with these individuals on a professional and personal basis and just getting to learn about them and the experiences that led them to begin to work in this field towards promoting transparency in the business community. Now, Ethics First is a digital platform that was launched last year. It basically is a tool that helps to simplify due diligence and helps businesses to improve on their ethical compliance structures. And the reason why I love Ethics First is it brings two things that I enjoy together. It brings innovation in terms of being something technology driven, and it also brings capacity building. I think a key part of developing Africa generally across board in any sphere that you're talking about is building capacity. What Ethics First does basically is helping businesses, and I'm just saying this in the most simplified terms, helping businesses to get in the right position to become viable businesses for investments, for partnerships, for growth. Businesses who are looking to scale and become global businesses moving out of the African space. So far, it's been a very interesting ride because I personally I have a little bit of UX design experience. And so I enjoy working on projects that bring out my creativity. And when I started working with the developers sometime last year to improve and test the site, I really, really had a great time just seeing how users interact with the product and how, the back end of the product was put together and how it began to impact the community when it was launched last year.
Thank you so much for sharing. It's clear that you both have played a powerful role in SIPE Africa's programs. Can you please share an anecdote about a relationship or with a specific individual that really displays the impact these projects have on these communities?
So I guess an individual we've been able to work with, specifically related to the Sahel project, and his time at SIPE far outdates mine, is our field representative, Haroon Sadat. I really see him as driving our work there. He is so well connected and I think so in tune with the needs of the region. He, as well as his other staff member, Khadija Eje, who also works on our projects there, are based in Mauritania. And, they travel all over the region. I feel like doing the heavy lifting of this project in the sense of, they're really on the ground making the connections and reaching out to folks and allowing us to make connection with new partners. So it's really just inspiring. I feel like every meeting, every call, he's so passionate and doing a million things to kind of push this work forward. And it's inspiring and kind of really encouraging to be able to work with someone like that and to see that the impact that he's been able to have. And again, his time at SIPE and his impact has been going on for years. So I feel privileged just to be able to work with him in this small snapshot. But you can tell when you speak to him, he has such a greater and long-term vision for the region and for his own country as it relates to international development and countering violent extremism and the inclusion of women and the inclusion of youth. And he just has so many great ideas. So he's definitely someone that I've felt lucky to work with in this space.
I echo Adia's praises for Haroon because I work closely with him. He's also a member of the network, so definitely agree with everything that has been said. But for me, it's difficult to just pinpoint one person because honestly, a lot of the people who make up this network generally inspire me. If you have worked on issues of transparency and accountability in Africa, it's not an easy task. It's an uphill task. So when people come together to put in their time, their energy, their resources to addressing such issues, it's from a place of genuine passion to make a change. So yes, I would say the entire network just inspires me every time when they come up with brilliant initiatives, thinking out of the box, using the field experience that they have. So it's not prescriptive initiatives they're bringing, it's initiatives based on experiences that even they have had. It's just very inspiring to see people thinking and working to make a change.
So, I would say both Adia and Imabong are definitely part of our Africa strategy, which is essentially around we call it a vision, but it's more of a catchphrase, and it's all about growing democracy and to democratize growth. And under this, the Africa team is really focused around 6 different strategic areas. And we're working, as you've already heard, and because they're intricately involved in really all of those projects, but we're working on digital economy work. We are working on the issues of anti-corruption or business integrity. We're working really on business leadership, and this is working with a network of over 550 associations and chambers around Africa. We're working on, again, another project that Adia highlighted was the project around Business for Peace and some of the work that she and her colleagues are doing specifically in the Sahel. And then, we are also very deeply involved in terms of a new area that we started to get involved in, because one of the great opportunities now in Africa is around the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement. And so we just set up a practice and an area of work around trying to get more involved in terms of trade and inclusion. So it sort of is good because it brings me to my next question for Imabong and Adia, which is over the past couple of years that you've been working for CYPE, what do you like best about your work at CYPE?
I would say, I guess, kind of an earlier point that I mentioned, but I think one of my favorite parts at CYPE is that, even coming in as like an entry-level position, I feel like from day one, my input was valued. And I think that was my favorite part in knowing that I could help shape the work that we do. And similarly, being able to collaborate across teams, but also within our own teams and with different groups has, I think, been my favorite part. Definitely something that I wasn't necessarily expecting, but I think is, quite refreshing and then encouraging. That is a core kind of value of CYPE, but also of the Africa team.
Similar to Adia's favorite part, I think it's there isn't a fear of innovation. Innovation is very welcome. And I think being on the Africa team, Adia and I are privileged to work on, if I may say, one of the most innovative teams in CYPE.
For sure.
But just the acceptance of every idea. There's nothing too wild or nothing too unconventional. There's always room to work on every suggestion that comes in. So
I can't let that question go without following up with the other side of the coin. So, quick fire. What it is that is the drawbacks of the job. And let's be honest, I mean, in the nonprofit sector, I know there are some things that keep me up at night. So we have good people working on it, but these are difficult projects that we're working on. So what are some of the challenges that you've faced?
For me, a challenge I've had, not just specifically with CYPE, just in my time in the development space, is long-term impact. I struggle sometimes with not seeing a difference actually be made. And I think this cuts across every sector of the development world. We do little bits, well, not so little, but smaller bits of work that will probably begin to make proper impact in the next 10, 15 times years. And just being able to reconcile the work that I'm doing to the change that I want to see while I'm still here, while I still am in field, is something I've struggled with a bit. And one of the reasons why I definitely enjoy working with the network is despite knowing that the impact of the work that we're doing may come a bit later, being able to see these experts who work with smaller businesses, smaller parts of the business community across Africa, and actually seeing real-time change in the differences that they make in their policies, in their internal governance systems is very, very rewarding for me.
And for me, I think one of the challenges for working in the space is definitely having to adapt at any moment. And again, I think, that's not really specific to CYPE, but just kind of working in this space, you never know. All these initiatives are partner-led, right? Which is part of the great part, but I think it's also part of the challenge of working through any challenges, to align your vision for the project or for the outcomes or the goals with your partner, keeping in mind the regional or national context, be it from a political or economic standpoint, and just being ready to adapt the project or your work or the timelines to match. And so I think that's definitely a challenge, but I think a little bit part of the excitement, but definitely a challenge in terms of always being kind of mindful of that and being able to work with your team and with the partners to still meet your project goals while knowing that maybe that original plan might have to change a few times to get there.
Great. Imabong and Adia, it's truly been a pleasure to spend some time having you share your thoughts and everything else. But I'd like to sort of conclude with one final question, which is, if you could answer it both in terms of the short term, in terms of, next 6 months or a year, and perhaps even as well add longer term. So as one of the emerging leaders at SIPE and in Washington, D.C., or working for an organization in Washington, D.C., what are some of your goals, short-term goals and long-term goals?
Imagine you have a crystal ball. This is usually how we end the program, is we look into our crystal ball and we speak to what we want in the near future and maybe 5 years later down the road. What would you like to see as far for your own role and impact, as well as the SIPE Africa program?
I would love to have a crystal ball to kind of maybe give me those answers, because I feel like in a lot of ways, sometimes I feel like I don't have that vision that may seem directionless to some, but for me, I feel like it gives me the freedom to say yes to opportunities as they arise. But if I could guess what that crystal ball would say for me, I would think in the short term, at least for me, I'm hoping to continue to develop my project management skills. I think in the various stages, from the conceptualization to the idea, to the outputs, to the outcomes. That's something I'm actively working on getting better at. And I think also just management of people, in being able to be a better manager as more team members join and other team members join at SIPE, and how to do that. And then I think in the long term, I'm hoping to potentially, build my expertise in a specialization of some kind, potentially maybe around sustainable development or, climate change and security in Africa specifically. And I think this is a kind of emerging space at SIPE, and what I hope for the Africa team as well, kind of in my own bias of being interested, is maybe evolving into the space of, the role of the private sector and ESG initiatives, so environmental, social, and governance spaces, and the role of the private sector in that, and also in peace building and how it kind of all works together. So those are kind of my own personal goals, as well as what I hope for the SIPE Africa team, and hopefully to be a part of that as well going forward.
Yes, speak it into existence. That's what I always say.
This is my plug to Lars, so also glad he's here to hear it.
In terms of long-term, well, I don't enjoy answering that question very, very much, just because I have learned to be a bit fluid in terms of my career and how I progress through. But one thing that I do know is I would like to remain in the development sector, and I would like to remain at SIPE. So over the next maybe year, I would love to continue to work on anti-corruption work with communities who suffer the brunt of corruption and of lack of transparency within Africa and specifically within Nigeria, and then continue to work on initiatives like Ethics First, which I honestly just think is amazing, because there also is the angle of introducing more African communities and businesses to automated systems and new technologies, which for some reason a lot of older firms and more traditional businesses are not very keen to. So just moving in that direction of innovation for the business community generally. Longer term, I would like to definitely remain in the development space, like I said, and possibly lean a bit to impact investing and, just looking at helping companies to remain socially conscious and to have positive impacts on the society and to help companies to have positive impacts on the community and the ecosystem naturally.
Adia and Imabong, thank you so much for joining us on our Emerging Leaders podcast. I was really happy to hear that in the short term and medium term, both of you are planning to continue to really be part of the Africa team and make your contributions that are so great in terms of our work and what we're doing. And truly, it's an honor and a pleasure to have you as a colleague and here working at SIPE. I'd also, of course, like to thank my co-hosts today, Zoe and Autumn, for helping facilitate this and really giving us an opportunity to learn more about Adia and Imabong. Today, you covered a lot of ground. You talked about a lot of great programs that you're working on specifically. Adia was talking a bit about some of our Sahel programs, and if anybody wants to learn more about that, they can go and visit our webpage, Imabong as well was talking about ethics first and some of the anti-corruption and business integrity work that we're doing. And we have also a web page for that as well, and a couple of videos to provide. So I would welcome all of you to keep in touch with us. You can also reach us via Twitter and via Facebook. But we definitely look forward to working with everyone and to hearing more from everybody else. Again, to conclude, thank you for joining our podcast today on emerging leaders. We have two brilliant people at CYPE who are really demonstrating this on an everyday basis, and it was truly an honor and a pleasure to have Adia Armstrong and Imabong Akpan-Ita as part of our podcast here at CYPE. Thank you.
Democracy That Delivers has been brought to you by the Center for International Private Enterprise. For more information, please visit CYPE.org.